Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. This is our last community meeting of the year with Open Metadata Winter Edition. So for those of you that this is the first time joining us in these meetings, we try to really do them monthly, and we go over community stats, release highlights, some webinars, community spotlights. So if also at some point you would like to join here and basically showcase how you're using Open Metadata in your company, please feel free to reach out to us. We would be more than happy to get that scheduled. And today we have a very exciting agenda because we'll start, as always, with reviewing our metrics and stats and seeing how the community is doing. We'll have the Open Metadata 2024 wrapped and see how we have evolved throughout the full year. We have Andres with us that he's going to announce and show the official Terraform module that it's fresh out of the oven. And in the end, we'll showcase you how you can build a scalable and automated data governance using both Open Metadata and Collate. So hopefully this agenda looks exciting. Thank you all for joining, and let's get moving. We'll start, as always, with the metrics. So in this last month, we got 11 new open source developers, more than 170 new stars, almost 250 new community members in Slack, as well as people following us both in Twitter and in Meetup. If you are not yet in Slack, this is the best place that you can actually get in touch with us. We can help you answer your questions, make sure that you're succeeding in your POC. When moving to prod, you can share any feature request with us and with the team, and basically discuss anything related to Open Metadata. We'll share the link in the chat as well. And let's review how we are doing in terms of PRs and support posts. So we have been really crossing that 75 barrier PR for almost every week in the last 6 weeks, for a total of 321 PRs in the last month, as well as almost 500 questions directly in Slack. So here, if you are new, please say hi, share your use case, share the context. We are more than happy to help. And if you are already a veteran and there might be some questions and say, oh, actually, I already stumbled upon that, or that's something that I already asked in the past, feel free to chip in, feel free to raise each other, make sure that we can all succeed with using Open Metadata. And in terms of questions, we don't only give you the place to ask questions, we're also answering and resolving almost everything that comes into the Slack. And then either there's some bugs that we are working on or very small feature requests coming in. And as you can see, the actual activity trend in Slack, it's always growing. Now we have people that hopefully are already starting their vacations or finishing the last quarter of the year. And we are very much looking forward to meeting you again in January. And as always, we are super happy, super grateful for all of the awesome community contributions that we have. If this is your first time contributing to open source, we have some good first issues that you can find directly in GitHub. We have a contributors channel in case that you need any help, maybe spinning up the process, or you want to ask maybe some questions or some guidance about some specific issues that you would like to tackle. Or if there's actually something that you have already identified that it's not working as expected, and instead of shooting an issue, you want to directly come to us with a possible solution, we are also more than happy to discuss around that. So thank you to the 16 community contributions that we've had since the meeting in November. And let's start with how the full year has been looking like. So we have gained almost 90 open source developers, more than 2,500 GitHub stars. This is actually a bit less than 220 stars per month, which is an awesome number. We also almost doubled the community members. We gained more than 3,200 in the last 12 months, which is amazing. As you can see, the community is really growing. People is really active in Slack. So feel free to join there if you are not there yet. And if you want to join these 1,000 people that are following us on Twitter, following us on Meetup, so that you are actually not missing any of these meetups and any of these community sessions that we have, make sure you go, you follow, and you are not going to actually miss any events that we are going going to do in 2025. And going back to 2024, we did 11 meetups and webinars. So we actually saw each other almost every month. And as you can see, the activity in Slack was through the roof. It's not only about the posts that we had in the questions in general and whatnot, where we crossed the 7,000 metric. We actually have very, very, very lively discussions with 27K replies and a lot of nice reactions and emojis and fun that we are having in the community. But it's not only the social part. Let's talk a bit of shop, right? Because we actually merged 3,250 PRs in the full year, closed more than 1,000 issues, and we did 54 releases, which, if you actually counting, is even a little bit more than one release per week. So as you can see, we are very active, even not only for the new things, new pieces that we are throwing out, but continuously improving and iterating the product thanks to the feedback that all of you are giving us. And if we try to break down, it was very, very hard to prepare this slide to actually just get the pieces that we have marketed, or that at least they have excited us the most. Those are some of the features, some of the improvements that we have prepared for 2024. As you can see, a lot of new cool things on the profiler and data quality side, with custom profiler metrics that you can tune directly from the UI, allowing you to enable or disable the computation of the metrics, the really great incident manager to actually track the end-to-end of all of the data quality tests that you are able to create from the UI, so that it's not only just I create and I forget about it, I create and I make sure that any issue that our data has, we can properly bring it into resolution. We also created the data observability alerts and notifications. We greatly improved the data quality results graph. We revamped the data quality UI a lot, and we introduced the awesome table difference data quality test. In terms of lineage, we improved the UI. We made it way, way more performant, easier to navigate. We added all of these layers for you to have this really like Google Maps experience, when you can see either the tables or the columns, the data quality test, and we will keep iterating in this idea, just moving forward with governance or any other items that we already have the context in the platform, as well as adding the column lineage search so that you can actually make sense, get out all of the noise that you might have in your platform, and really focus on those pieces, how the data is moving for the use cases that you are the most interested in. In terms of the search, in terms of discovery, as you have really, really fresh how we presented in the last community meetup, that we introduced metric as an asset for governance to actually unify and prepare all of these definitions of metrics in your organization. But we also added the API service and API entities so that you can actually hook up these open API definitions and start making sense on how those are being mapped within your organization. We added the airbag capabilities onto the search experience. We did a very, very awesome revamp on the data asset explorer. We created the new widget. We actually got awesome feedback from you folks on that piece of work. And we implemented not only the domains, but also how you can play and organize them into subdomains. And just to finalize this part, in the platform and the generic UI changes, we have currently 15 translations, and most of them coming from you folks from the community. So thank you for giving that grain of sand. Thank you for really helping us make sure that open metadata can reach more and more people. And we also introduced this right to left UI support. So if you are actually wondering, I'm not sure if maybe I can help translating with a language that is read right to left, the UI actually supports that as well. So please feel free to go and chip in. We added custom UI themes. We improved a lot the custom properties, added a bunch of new types. We revamped the full settings UI and experience, added a lot of landing page widgets, and we added 14 new connectors between the help from the community as well, so that you can keep connecting and extracting all of the relevant metadata from your platform. But on top of this, we have also added a bunch of new features for Collate as well. On top of these 3,000 PRs that we merged in open source, we continuously improved the profiler and data quality by sending a sample of the failed rows, new data quality dashboards, a full observability dashboards for you to monitor the overall platform experience, as well as data freshness, data quality tests, and tests based on anomaly detection and AI. In terms of the platform, we have added Collate-specific landing page widgets, such as the pipeline status or data quality. We have added the ability to bulk upload assets directly from the UI. So if you want to add directly multiple tables or databases or schemas, you can do it by directly importing some CSV files. We have added support for ER diagrams for you to customize and create your own custom data insights dashboard so that you can actually reflect and keep track of those metrics that make sense for you and your company. And we build on top of these open source available connectors, 6 new connectors as well, for a total of 20 new connectors that have landed this year in Collate. Also, you might already remember that we introduced Collate AI features, such as this NLP query generation directly from the chatbot, how you can automate the description generation from your tables, so that when you are creating these new systems, you are not starting from a blank page, which sometimes can feel a bit daunting, and how you can also use Collate AI for query optimization of those queries that the processes are already bringing into the platform, and you either want help making sense of that information, or you want to see if there's any way that you can bring those queries into the next level. And finally, for governance, we introduced the Knowledge Center for you to document your processes or anything and everything about your data. We introduced the metadata automations, the custom governance workflows, as well as the ability to create your own custom data certification workflows to stamp how your data is moving from bronze to silver to gold. So as you can see, great things, a lot of work that everyone in the community has put on 2024 to bring open metadata and the community into the next level. And that being said, now I'm going to pass the word to Andres, because he's going to show us this final new piece of great features that are landing this year with the Terraform module for AWS.
Thank you very much, Pera. Hello, everyone. I'm Andres from the DevOps team here at Collate, and I'm going to talk to you about our official Terraform module to deploy open metadata on AWS Elastic Kubernetes service. You can see my screen, right?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. So using this new goodie is the easiest way to follow the steps you can find on our official documentation in the Kubernetes deployment section for EKS. Let's start from the beginning. Where can you find this module? You can find it on the open metadata space in the Terraform registry. As always, the code is hosted on GitHub on a public repository. It's in its early stages, and we are eager to see your contributions and filing issues and submitting pull requests to expand and improve it. Let me jump quickly on a quick demo. We will come back to the documentation later. With this Terraform code, I've deployed my open metadata application using the 1.5.12 version. Here, I just ran Terraform init to init the module, and I've created, to take advantage of the time, our application, and it's running now in a cluster that I already have deployed. Let me use port forwarding to access the application, and let's check that it's, well, I'm going to use the default login credentials, and let's see here that we have the 1.5.12 version. Let me do a quick check that everything is going nice. All right, it seems. So now what I'm going to showcase is how to upgrade to the latest version that we have. So we can close this, and here I'm going to check that I didn't forget running anything or I don't have any drift before updating the code. Okay, here we see that there's no trick. We don't have changes to be applied. And I'm going to install the latest version from our module. Okay, here, let me show you again the change. With this constraint, I'm going to install the latest version that we have on 1.6. That should be 1.6.1. Here in the, as soon as Terraform finished, we will see here in the namespace that new pods are spawned, and once they are ready, it will start replacing the old ones, and the upgrade should be done with zero downtime. Let's give Terraform a bit of time while we go back to the documentation. Here, if we scroll down a bit, we can find the deployment strategies that we have supported for each component. Please notice that OpenMetadata can only be deployed using our official Helm chart. Using Helm as the provisioner is the default option for all components, and it's ideal for development environment or quickly trying out our product. For production, we recommend using AWS for all possible components. This option may make use of AWS managed services for databases and OpenSearch domain. And the last option is to deploy OpenMetadata using existing resources, such as your own databases, OpenSearch domain, or Airflow service. You can choose the combination that fits better your needs from this matrix. However, if you use an existing Airflow installation, it must be fully operational, as the module won't take care of the Airflow database in that case. Here you can find also some more examples on how to use for AWS for all components with a minimal setup, relying on our default values. Also providing all the infrastructure, all the parameters for the components if you already have it, using existing as a provisioner. Scrolling a bit down, you can find a complete example that will deploy OpenMetadata from scratch, not only the application, but also the additional supporting infrastructure, like a VPC, the entire cluster with the nodes. So a metric server to check the metrics of the cluster. And this is great to try it out from scratch without needing to write code. It's just coming here, set your provider, and running Terraform init and apply. Then also here, you can find links to all the documentation generated by Terraform docs. I'm sure that our fellow DevOps from other companies will love to check this. And here you can see also some other features that this module have, like adding extra environment variables from just setting them, or you can use this other parameter to add extra environment variables from Kubernetes secrets. Let's see how this is doing. Okay. Here we see that we have two pods for OpenMetadata. The others, it's almost are replaced all, Airflow. So once this is ready to go, it will be terminating the other one. So I think we came just in time. So now that is terminating this and the other, the new one that is being running for 3 minutes. It's running. I think we can go and check how is it doing. Let's log in and let's see that we upgraded our open metadata application in less than 5 minutes to our latest version. It's a pretty straightforward demo, and I hope you see that it's very easy to use our module. And if we see traction from the community on this, we for sure will put more effort on expanding it, and let's see how it goes. So with this, I will be finished and handing over to Pera.
Awesome. Thanks, Andres. It's really great to see how we are not only putting the effort on the product itself, but also on the experience that the developers are having playing and contributing with it, because you know that we already have the documentation and the guidelines for you to deploy it directly in Docker or bare metal or Kubernetes and whatnot. But we keep getting some questions, people getting confused with the guide. So using Terraform will be one of the best and fastest ways that you can get from your POC in Docker desktop that it literally takes less than 5 minutes to prepare your instance into directly moving for a prod ready environment based on AWS and Kubernetes and your external RDS databases and whatnot. So thanks, Andres, for the effort. Thanks for the work. And if you have any questions, you know that you can find Andres on Slack, so make sure that you are joining there. Then let's move already into the second part of the meeting today, which is actually going over all of this history, all of these different features that we've done on the governance side, so that we can do some recap. We can try to understand, okay, how can we make the most out of the glossary, how we can make the most out of the classification, and which features we can rely on both in Open Metadata and in Collate to make our lives easier and make sure that our governance practices and governance teams are going to properly scale through time and while the company is also growing, while the data that you are trying to manage is also growing, because we all know, we all have already seen that data is never staying still. There will be new people joining, reorganizations, new sources that need to be tracked, and we need to make sure that we are following and we have the right strategies in place so that we can properly adapt and grow and evolve together with the needs of our organization. But let's start from the beginning, no? And in terms of governance, in Open Metadata and in Collate, you are going to find two main big pieces here. One being the glossary and one being the classification. And when we're talking about classification, we're talking about how we can actually make sense of all of the data that we have in our organization and place it in different buckets. And here, one of the easiest examples for us to understand is when we're talking about PII, is when we're talking about this personally identifiable information. And one interesting thing is that, okay, I have one table, it can either not have any PII or have PII that it's non-sensitive or have PII that it's sensitive. And in this case, whenever we are creating a new classification, we can actually choose if these assets or these tags that we'll have in our classification are going to be mutually exclusive or not, which is actually going to help you, for example, define organizations such as, if I have a table that is PII sensitive, it does not make sense for this table to also be PII non-sensitive. So again, when we are talking about classifications, we are talking about organizing and separating all of our data and putting it into different buckets that then we can explore and help us make sense of the different pieces of information that we have in our platform. On the other hand, we have the glossary. And when we're talking about the glossary, we're talking about how can we expand the information from our assets and manage it in a centralized place, right? How can we define the language that we all follow in our organization? Just to give an example, how do we make sense of a customer? What does it mean to have a customer in our organization, or a bank account, or a credit card? So you can actually define one or multiple glossaries in your organization where you can unify all of these different terms, all of these important pieces of language, very much related to the business, that then people can use to come make even more sense of the data and opens another door for you to discover data that you might be interested in. So for example, in this case, if I go into this general glossary, I have this ABN term, which is an Australian business number, and I can see that it has descriptions. I can specify what are other synonyms that actually make sense within my organization, how in which other ways I can identify the same business term. I can add external references. I can link other terms if needed. I can add even tags into this glossary. So that might be a very important difference between classifications and glossary terms, is that in terms we can actually link them to specific tags and classifications in our system. And as you can see, we can also make sense and very easily discover which assets might be related also to this glossary term. Now, a very powerful feature, and now I'm going to put the hat of a data steward or someone from the governance office, is, okay, I have these two separate worlds, one that is talking about the language of our organization, how we can define all of these different topics in the business, and the second world, which is the classifications and the tags on how I can actually organize the different pieces of information that I have in the platform. So let's take a look, for example, here at the credit card. No, so credit card might be a very big PII sensitive item, because if I have the number of the card, I might be able just to pull the thread and actually say, okay, so Pere might be the actual holder of that card. No, so one very important and powerful feature is that if we then add a tag to a glossary term, and now I'm going to jump into my table and I say, okay, this column here might actually be talking about this credit card term. Whenever I apply this term into my asset, as you can see, the sensitive tag that I initially defined into my glossary term will be automatically applied. And this is a great way to have your first gap jumping in the business between the technical assets and your business domains, because not only you can actually now make more sense and understand a bit more the data that you might have in your platform, you are also ensuring that any specific classification, as important as when we are talking about PII tags, is not going to get lost. This business translation about, hey, actually the credit card is an asset that we might need to treat very, very carefully because it contains sensitive information. This bridge is there thanks to this automated tagging of the assets. And not only that, let's imagine that then tomorrow we sit down with the rest of our governance team and we say, hey, actually the credit card, it should not only be linked to PII sensitive tagging, I might need to add something else. And then this something else could be, I don't know, just password to put something simple. And if I try to update this information, as you can see, it's giving me this pop-up, it's giving me this warning saying that this action will update the tag to all of the assets that are currently linked to the credit card. So I can accept that, might take a few seconds, and now let me refresh my page here. And as you can see, the password tag has automatically been added, has been automatically inherited from the credit card as a glossary term. And as you can see, we can also do it the other way around. Maybe we say, oh, actually, I messed it up. This password doesn't really make sense. The same way that we can keep adding all of these tags, it also makes sense that we can go back on our feed and just remove those tags whenever they don't make sense anymore. So as you can see, with glossary terms, we are not only expanding on these definitions, we are not only making it easier for business-oriented people to discover the assets that make sense of the data, we are also operationalizing this way of adding tags in bulk to all of those assets that might be related to glossary terms. Now, this is super powerful, right? But in the end, with great power comes great responsibility, right? How do we make sure that if we are changing a few things here and there, or that the glossaries that we are creating do actually make sense in our organizations? Because then maybe we have some permissions based on the PII sensitivity of our assets and whatnot. And as you know, you can also define these rules and policies directly within the platform. No? So we need to make sure that we have the right processes in place so that we can make sense on who can change what on the glossaries, and how can we create and review and validate that these pieces that we are adding in our glossary make all the sense that we expect them to make here. So one thing that we added in Collate, let me log in the new tab, was this workflows feature, which will help us actually make sense on what are the steps in our platform, what are the steps in Collate that we need to follow in order to create a new glossary term. How can we move that term from being created and being a draft to pass it to a state that anyone else in the organization can actually review that until it's approved. So in this workflows view, you can actually see all of these three. You can make sense of the different steps that we have. So let's take this for a spin. I will go back into my glossaries, and I will add here, for example, under the ACH transfer, I'm going to add a couple of new terms. And as you can see, in this case, I added myself as a reviewer, which means that any change that happens to this term or to the child terms that I can create into my glossary are going to need to be approved, in this case, by me. But you can add anyone else in your team or directly assign full teams that are going to be the custodians of these changes that are happening in the glossary. So in this case, I'm going to click here on Add, and I can very well link assets from this page too, but now I'm actually interested on playing a bit with this approval workflow when I try to add a new glossary term. So glossary term test 1, can give it a rather meaningful description. I save it, and as you can see, this term is yet not approved. I'm the owner, I created it. I'm waiting for someone to actually approve that term, but I won't be able to actually use this glossary term. If I go to my table and I come here and I find, where did that live? It was living under financial services. Awesome. If I go under financial services, as you can see, ACH transfer does not have anything under it, does not have anything under it yet, because this term is still in draft. Someone needs to take care of that. Someone needs to actually approve it. But if I refresh the page, now see how it's not in draft anymore. It automatically moved into in review, and we have now this open task where the approval request for glossary term test 1 is pending. So let's try to make sense of this flow. Let's go back into our workflow UI to actually try to follow at which point the asset was moving from one box into the other. So first of all, we know that here, our ACH transfer term has a reviewer, right? So we are checking the first box. And then since I have a reviewer, the question is the glossary term ready to be reviewed or not? And here it's super powerful because we can play with these rules. We can actually define within our organization which steps are the ones that make sense that we follow in order to answer the question, is my glossary term ready to be reviewed or not? By default, we're just going to say, hey, if the description is set, we can go on. And since in this case, the description is set for my glossary term, I have already this task created. So now I can click on approving that, and if I refresh my page, I see already that my glossary term, that it's the child of the ACH transfer, is nice and approved. Now, let's go back and let's try to play a bit more with this rule here. And maybe I want to add that, hey, every time that I create a glossary term, I actually need to inform a custom property that we have previously said about the legal entity that might be linked or might be defined, whatever it is that makes sense in our business. But this legal entity needs to be informed whenever we're defining this. Otherwise, really, we don't want to waste time. We don't want to start opening tasks and popping all of these endless conversations where our reviewers, our stewards are always prompting people to, hey, you actually need to add the legal entity. Let me know when that's done so that I can actually see if this makes sense or not. So we can make sure that we are properly defining which pieces of information, let me refresh so that it appears here, which are the different pieces of information that make sense for me before I can actually go on the task of creating all of these terms. So right now I'm going to create another one. Glossary term test 2. I'm adding the description, but I'm not going to add yet any custom property. So I could be refreshing and refreshing and waiting for as long as we need, because until we come and we change the legal entity custom property, this is never going to move into in review. So I can come and I can say, so now change this. We are going to give a few seconds for the workflow to kick in, and it's coming and saying, okay, now this is ready to be reviewed. So if I go into my tasks, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to accept it. Now I have my glossary term green, nice, and approved. But something that is also very interesting is that if I go into my workflows and we check here in the configuration tab, the workflow triggers in two scenarios. One is when the glossary term is being created, but also when the glossary term is being updated. So if I now come here and I say, okay, I want to change the description for something different, this is going to trigger the workflow just in any second and move it to in review. It's going to create another task. This needs to be validated again because we came here and changed something that was previously approved. And if I actually come and I come here and I say, okay, I just want to remove my legal entity, and we give again the workflow a few seconds to kick in another time, it's going to say, hey, I'm actually now missing some important information for my business. I will just move this back to draft because we do need to validate something else before it can be reviewed. So as you can see, managing all the glossaries is a very important task. It helps us organize the business language. It helps us bridge all of these tags, all of these classifications into our technical assets as well. And thanks to these workflows definitions, thanks to this internal process picking up when things are being created, when things are being updated, you can make sure that no unintended changes are going to kick in until the reviewer comes and says, okay, this looks good to me. And so far, what we've seen is rather manual processes, no? Because I need to come, I either create my classifications, I create my glossaries, which does make sense for it to be manual because you need to define within your organization which are the important pieces that you want to reflect into this enterprise glossary that you're going to be defining here. But what happens if we really don't want to go into all of our tables and spend a lot of time into, okay, which volumes do I tag, which glossary terms do I specify into each and every of our cases? So let's see, in this case, how OpenMetadata can also help us into, let's say, smoothing out some of these experiences. So I have here this service, the meetup demo, and I early just created a couple of services, a couple of ingestion, sorry. One is the metadata ingestion. You know that this one is the one that it's going to connect, in this case, into Redshift, extract all of the databases, the schemas, the tables, kind of make sense and try to organize all of the rich metadata that these sources have and bring that into OpenMetadata. And then the second one that we created here is actually a process that is brand new from the release 1.6, which is the auto classification ingestion. And this auto classification is actually going to do a couple of things for you. One is that you can actually toggle from here if you want to extract and store sample data from your services, so that whenever I'm going to go back, and I think I was looking at the orders table. Okay, I think that I have a lot of different services. Let me come directly from this view. So if I go into my orders table, if I do want to enable the sample data view, which I think I did on the customers table, perfect. So if we want to actually make it easier for whoever is discovering this data, they can come here, and after taking a look at the schema and making sense of these technical definitions of the data, they might actually want to see a small taste on how the data might look like. So you can control that with the store sample data toggle, and you can also do that to enable auto classification. And some of you, if you have already been here for a few releases, these pieces you might remember about. Oh, I think that this was before on the profiler workflow, and you are completely correct. In the 1.6 release, we actually took that out of the profiler. We are creating this other workflow to make it easier to actually customize and figure out and apply all the filters and whatnot, and make sure that we can keep evolving these auto classification features here. So you have this as a separate workflow that you can play, and you can define, hey, do I want to store the sample data, or do I want to enable this auto classification? And with this auto classification, you can actually achieve the following. When I have my sensitive customers table, and this process is going to work in two ways. One is that it's going to scan the names of the column. So in this case, it's saying, hey, this looks like it's talking about users. This looks like it's talking about social security numbers, addresses, and whatnot. So we try to make sense. We have some internal rules that try to make sense as much as possible about which kind of information we can expect this data to hold based on the column names. But we also have an AI process on top of it, which, thanks to entity recognition models, we can actually say, okay, this column does not really make any sense name-wise. And we all know that in engineering, naming things might be one of the most difficult things, and we did a really, really poor job in this case. But if I go and now I take a look at the sample data, I'm going to see that, okay, this data warehouse underscore X10 column does indeed contain some email addresses. So what these NLP models are going to do is they are going to actually scan the sample data. They are going to recognize that we are talking about emails, and indeed, emails are PII sensitive information. Now, something that is very powerful and very important for you to know, even if for whatever reason, compliance, regulations, privacy, whatever it is that makes sense in your organization, you do want to benefit from this auto classification, because again, just doing all of this work from a blank canvas takes a lot of work, and you will keep having new tables, new sources that you are trying to bring into OpenMetadata as well. And doing this first pass via an automation, it's going to free a lot of time from your hands. But even if you say, hey, I want to have this auto classification enabled, but I do not want to spill any of the beans about my sample data, you can directly come here, disable the sample data to be stored, and we will still use during the process these few rows that we are getting to validate these entities, to recognize the shape and the entities behind this data, and we are going to send the tagging process, but we are not going to store the sample data directly in there. So this is actually something that we did not really have ready, or it wasn't really maybe that easy to configure when we were in the profiler. And now that we have this separate auto-classification workflow, it is super simple, super straightforward, how you can make sense of all of these different toggles. So this would be one possible way on how you can scale your team, scale your processes, while still maintaining some safety net about, at least I know that even if it's an automation, someone is looking at the PII sensitivity of my data. But then, as you might remember, in Collate, we have these automations, this governance automations feature, which I actually like to think about that as governance recipes. No, and in this case, the same way that we can come into our services and prepare, there we go, come into the services and prepare all of these different workflows that we say, hey, I want this metadata extraction or profiling or lineage or whatnot to be executed every day, every week, whenever it fits our use case. We can actually now do the same in a governance perspective. And I can come here and I'm going to tie this back into the previous examples about the glossaries and the classifications. I'm going to add now an automation that it's going to, first of all, navigate some of the tables that we might have. We can choose each kind of asset that we might need, but in this case, just to follow up the examples, I'm going to select a table. I'm going to filter this table and say, hey, I actually want to apply this automation into my meetup demo service. And for example, I only want to, what I will try to do here is to add a glossary term. But this glossary term, I want to add it only on those tables that might have this bank transfer amount column. And then we have a set of actions that we can configure. So what do I want to do on top of these three assets that the automation is going to be tackling? And as you can see, this is very, very handy because it already shows us and helps us understand, okay, which assets am I about to update, no? So we can click here, we can double check, okay, those three tables kind of make sense for me. And then I'm going to say, hey, I want to add some tags. And in this case, I do want to add a glossary term about the credit card. I'm going to add the glossary term, but I actually do not want to add it on the table itself because I'm actually filtering by this bank transfer amount column. So I do want to apply this glossary term to the column itself. So I'm going to apply it to the children, select the right column, click on next, schedule it. I want this to run every week. But since I'm not very, very patient, I'm just going to trigger it now. But as you can see, this is a very powerful way to say, hey, today I might only have three tables that contain this column. But maybe next week, next month, next quarter, whenever it is that we keep growing our data platform, I might have other tables or any other asset that is also following this set of rules. So by properly defining and leveraging these automations, you can actually make sure that whatever it is that changes in the future is also going to be following these same recipes. And this unlocks a very, very, very huge potential because, as we know, data assets, they grow in a certain rate, but our governance teams, they are not growing linearly with the assets. And all the time they will need to take care and maintain and document and understand a growing number of tables or services, databases, whatever it is that we are playing in our organization, right? So by leveraging these automations, we can actually take one step back and say, okay, I don't want to go case by case. I want to define this set of rules. I want to define all of these recipes and make sure that they get properly applied through time. And now if I click here again, I'm going to take a look at my orders processed. As you can see, the column that we selected has applied the credit card term. And since we know that the credit card term was properly linked into this PII sensitive tag, that was inherited as well. And this, I think, it's one great example that we have. But before calling it a day or calling it a year at this stage, I do want to show you one last very, very powerful automation that we have under this automations feature as well, which is the lineage propagation. Because let's take a look at this. It's very simple, but it's very representative, no? Whenever we're talking about, I'm building a data lake house, a nice organized data warehouse, whatever it is that you're building, you will get data from your transactional tables, put it in row, you might call it row, you might call it someone else, no? But in the end, you just move that data, you keep cleaning, transforming, aggregating all of these results, just making a bit of more business sense of whatever it is that the backends or any other services are bringing you. But as you can see, if I zoom just a tiny bit here, I have my ID, first name, and last name columns that exist from my raw customers to the staging customers to the customers table to the new customers table. As you can see, not a lot of imagination, but hopefully the example is representative. And what I want to discuss here is from a governance perspective. Do we really want to do the work in this case 4 times? And that's just a very little example about, do I really need to document all of these columns and their metadata into 4 different places times whatever number of growing services and lineages and whatnot that you might have in your organization? Or can we say, hey, I was able to identify via these automated lineage workflows and whatnot, or DBT, basically all of these other nice pieces that the ingestion framework of Open Metadata is bringing us. I have been able to identify the source of truth. Why cannot I just define the right metadata into my source of truth and let it flow? No, let it just move from table to table to table, just passing along all of these important pieces of information. So let's try to do that. I'm going to come here into my raw customers table. Okay, and in this case, I'm going to add something into my ID. Okay, I'm just going to define whatever is going on into this ID. I'm just, whatever, these couple of tags. I'm going to add these tags, and I'm going to add a nice description. So if I actually took my job seriously, this might have already taken a good few minutes on figuring out the right tags and description and whatnot, no? So now I can come back into my governance automations. I will add a new automation. We'll call it lineage propagation. I will select again my tables, figure out, in this case, I will just shoot it against or my meetup demo service, which I have just prepared for that. Did I inform the right table? Yes, meetup demo, awesome. And here in the action list, I'm going to choose lineage propagation, and we have some nice toggles. No? And this is also something that we improved quite a bit into 1.6, where you can choose, hey, do I want to propagate column pieces or just the actual main asset pieces? In this case, I'm the most interested onto my column level lineage. That's where 80% of my work, 90% of the work I'm sinking time in, and I'm going to propagate description, terms, and tags. And I'm going to click on next. I do want to make sure also that this at least runs once per week so that all of our metadata is nice and updated. But since I am not patient, I'm just going to trigger it now. See, now it's already cute. And what I expect is that, let me refresh this page too, so that we have the updated pieces on the right. So I'm expecting that these new random tags and description that I added on my raw customers table, they automatically appear, and looks like this ran before that I could actually show this. So this process is already kicking in, and it's saying, hey, this description and tags that we added to the raw customers have been propagated to the staging customers, have been not yet propagated. Let's see if I refresh now, if it's going to appear. Yes, awesome. Have been propagated to my customers table, and finally have been propagated to my new customers table. So as you can see, this process was smart enough to figure out how many hops do we need to do, what's the right information that we need to move from table to table to table to table, and it just took us a few clicks. And if it helped me save a bunch of time in this very simple example, just imagine the amount of huge effort that you can actually offload from your governance teams, and you can actually help them properly scale and properly automate, quote unquote, the tedious part of the job, which is, okay, which are the rules that do make sense into my organization, or where is the place that we can actually make the most benefit out of putting the time into documenting and adding all of these tags and glossaries. So as you can see, there's a lot of features that both Open Metadata and Collate are bringing on the table, a lot of different ways that you can actually tackle this problem about how we can apply not only the right definitions and the right tags into our assets, even if we need to analyze them one by one, as well as how can we make use of these automations, be it directly from the ingestions in the service or be it directly with these metadata automation details. So a lot of nice things that we were able to build in 2024 in the governance side. And now just time to thank you for the attention. And I think that we have a bunch of questions that have been coming in. Hopefully, we were able to actually answer some of them on the fly, but we have a couple of minutes. So any further questions that any of you folks would like to ask? I either explained myself very, very well or very, very bad, depending on, on how you look at it.
Hey, Pere, when some of these automations happen, what does the versioning and updated by look like for the
Let's take a look into that. So this, I think it was the one that I changed.
look at customers?
Yeah. If I now click onto my customers table, we take a look at the version. As you can see, it's the Automator application bot, the one that said, hey, I moved from, as you can, I did a test beforehand. So I deleted some tags before, and then I just triggered again the Automator. And as you can see, this nice div view about this bot actually applying all of these tags and all of these descriptions. And the same would be true also for the rest of the tables.
Awesome.
Thanks for asking, Suresh. More questions? Let's take a last one. And yes, we do record all of this and give us 1-2 days stops so that we can polish the recording and just send it in YouTube. We'll share also the recordings, I think, via mail and in Slack, just to make sure that you can get back to it or at least share it with the rest of your colleagues if someone was not able to make it today. Perfect. So thanks a lot for the time, folks. Thanks, Andres, for your presentation on Terraform. I think that you made a lot of DevOps people very, very, very happy that they do not need to maintain this on their own anymore. And at this moment, just want to wish you happy holidays, Merry Christmas if you're celebrating Christmas. Enjoy the new year, take some time off, and really looking forward to see you again in the January meetup. Enjoy the time with your families, and I will see you later. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.